Good afternoon and welcome to the Glendale Water and Power Commission. Today is March 1st, 2010. May I have a roll call, please?
Ajemian,
Present.
Armenian, Chan, Miller,
Present.
President Yao.
Present. The next item, please.
Consent items. The following are routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of the commission or audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such a request before the motion is proposed. This is to consider the revised minutes of the January 11, 2010 meeting. However, it seems as though that needs to be continued to next month.
I make a motion that the consideration of the minutes for both the January 11th meeting and the February 8th meeting be postponed until the meeting in April. I've just as a comment, I did submit corrections to the January 11th minutes that I thought were appropriate last week.
Right. Is there a second to Commissioner?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 So moved. Next item, please.
Item 3, reports information. Agenda item A, general manager topics.
I'm Ned Bassin, sitting in for General Manager Glenn Steiger. I have just one thing to report, and it's kind of perspective. The American Public Power Association will be having their Engineering and Operations Committee meeting later this month. And one of the things they will be doing is announcing awards for the electrical system reliability and safety evaluations that they have done. And we're anticipating good news from that. So we'll have more for you at the next meeting.
Great. Thank you. Next item.
Agenda item 3B, a report on the smart grid.
We can lower the lights. I have a short PowerPoint presentation and then a video to bring you up to date on the status of the smart grid. The AMI project, as kind of a review, because I know that you're familiar with it, is that it is replacement or upgrading of all of our electric and water meters with large data storage capability meters. This is a replacement of over 100,000 meters in the city. They will be have a two-way backhaul communications, which means that we'll be able to obtain data from the meters and be able to send information to the meters. It'll have a MDMS, which is a meter data management system, which is a computer system that will be able to make sense of all of the data that we'll be acquiring. To give a feel for this size, right now, for most residential customers, we read the meters once every 2 months. So that's 6 reads in a year. The capability of this system is to read as often as every 15 minutes. So it is a tremendous increase in the amount of data that we have, which can help people save energy, save water, and also allow us to develop some billing rates that people can take advantage of and hopefully reduce their costs. It will have a home gateway, which means that it will have a system that will allow customers to be able to see their energy usage in their home. Part of our program is to have a pretty extensive outreach to the customers, and so you'll hear a little bit more about that as I go along. Some of the finer points on AMI is distribution automation, smart grid devices for residential and small business customers, thermal energy storage, a demand response where we're able to actually call on customers who have signed an agreement to reduce their energy use in times of need, and for them to save money by doing that, and then a Wi-Fi backhaul system. The project timetable, back in August, we purchased the major equipment, which is the MDMS system and all of the meters. What's now 2 months ago, last January, we contracted with an installation contractor, and this past month we've been working on the computer hardware and software. We expect probably around the middle of this month to start customer notification for a demonstration project scheduled to start next month. The demonstration project is really intended for us to be able to work out the kinks of our program, make sure that the things are going right, optimize what we are doing, and get feedback from customers. We hope to have full deployment starting in September, and about a year after that, have all of the meters and the supporting systems in place. That doesn't mean that our project will be finished. It just means that we'll have the infrastructure in place. The demonstration project will be roughly 1% of our water and electric customers. And again, as I said, to test our processes and the system. It'll be an opportunity to ensure we are prepared to support our customers, because we do expect that customers will have questions and will be contacting us. And this will give us a better idea of what kind of questions they have and how many people will be contacting us. And also a chance to work specifically with individual customers to try to identify the kind of devices that they like to use in their homes. This is a map of Glendale showing where this 1% is. It's primarily right here near our offices, and then extending across the 405 freeway and up into the foothills. And the intent was to get a sampling of customers that are both residential, small and large commercial, and different types of geographic area for our test. For this, we have received a federal grant, or we have received the federal grant. We need to do the final contraction for that for $20 million, and we're anticipating a grant from the state of California for $1 million. This represents outside funding for our program, about a third of the total program. Today, we're doing the briefing for the commission, and in the middle of this month we expect to be meeting with certain groups in the demonstration area, and then start a wider campaign planning for the rollout in April as we start our demonstration rollout. And that's the slide presentation. Are there any questions on that? I do have a video which will, I think, particularly to the audience, provide a good deal more information.
Miller?
Thank you very much for the presentation. Very informative. My understanding is that we expect the investment here to be recovered through savings, and principally through savings in water and power. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And based on experience elsewhere, what kind of break-even point might be expected?
Our studies have indicated 8 years as the break-even point.
Okay.
But it depends very much on what other programs you can roll out.
Okay. And then the expected lifetime of the meters?
Well, the meters will have quite a long expected lifetime. What we're doing is entering into the realm, though, of computer systems, which have a much shorter lifetime. So,
okay, maybe that.
Some of that may need to be upgraded just because of the power. But the meters themselves can be 15 years.
Okay. I presume you'll be providing the commission with a report after the demonstration is completed.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Is the California grant of $1 million, is that reliable given the state's fiscal problems?
It's been promised.
Okay.
The money is supposed to be there, and it's been promised. And I guess it's as reliable as you can expect, given the. You're absolutely right with the situation from California. We expected by now to have gotten it. That hasn't happened.
But if we don't get it, we still expect a break-even point or a full recovery of the investment. And then if you could let us know where the public meetings are on March 16th and 17th, I'd certainly be interested in attending, and I think some of my colleagues might be as well if they can.
Let me just introduce two other people in this. Craig Keenan is the sponsor, internally our sponsor for the AMI, and Terry McDonald is the project manager. And so let me ask Terry if he can answer the question as to where those public meetings are. Have they been scheduled or located?
Okay. Thank you so much. That's all, Mr. President. Thank you.
I have a question. The overall goal of the AMI project, obviously, is to have both electric and water savings. What I wanted to understand, maybe this is too soon, but understand how the overall, how the public is going to be incentivized, obviously, to utilize the information obtained through the overall infrastructure, and how much of the savings will be actually be passed down to each individual customer, not as an overall customer base. Meaning, if somebody is looking at and monitoring their energy use and using off-peak hours of energy, are they going to be incentivized more, or will they be given a general reduction, as a group?
No, that's a good question. Right now, our rates do not incentivize people very much to shift energy use from one time period to another. So immediately, the savings would be, for the general public, would be to be able to see when they're using electricity that they don't need and being able to conserve more. We do plan, once we have the meters out, to do some experimental programs to try to find out what works best for customers. And that will allow people who basically don't need to use much electricity during the day to use it at night and to save on their bills just by shifting the time frame and making use of the fact that it's cheaper for us to provide electricity at night than it is during the day. And that's what we're looking for, is to try to match what people's needs are best with individual pricing. And so we will have programs, and that was part of my references to thermal energy storage, to demand management. Those will be, and there'll be other programs, but they are a little ways away.
Because just thinking about it, as a customer of GWP, if you go out of your way to really use off-peak hours, you want to be personally or individually incentivized for that, versus that going over a group, which you're not going to see that much of a difference, or you will see a general difference if everybody's participating, but not so much directly, proportional to the amount of savings you're doing.
One of the problems we have now is that residential meters do not identify for us that you're using the energy at night versus during the day, so we can't pay you for that because we don't know. With these new meters, we'll be able to provide a rate structure that you can benefit from it, and it will be automatic.
I have a question, Mr. Basson. Thank you for a great overview. My question is on the second slide, this home gateway. Can you expand on that, what that is and how it impacts the customer?
What a home gateway is there's two ways that a customer will be able to access his energy use information. One is he can go to the internet and see the information that we have and that our MDMS has placed for him. That information will be hours, maybe even a day old. But a gateway is another device that would go right in his home. It would take the signals from the meter, and it would be essentially instantaneous so that he can see exactly what his energy use is. It can also take information from us, which could show what the cost is at that time, or whether there's, depending upon the device in the home, what the price might be planned or expected if he was able to delay that load of laundry to the evening instead of doing it during the day, and how much money he would save by doing that.
So would that gateway be part of this demonstration where it's provided free to the customer, or is it something that the customer has to pay?
The gateway itself is part of this project, and it will be a capability. It's the home area network device that goes in the home that will provide the information itself. And that is something we're experimenting with, and we don't know for sure. In the beginning, I'm sure there'll be plenty that are free to the customer. We don't know what it will be in the future. This is a device where people are thinking that you'll be able to go into your local hardware store and pick out the one that you want and buy it, just as you would buy a thermostat.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Just-
for Mr. Batson?
Yeah, one more follow-up question on the previous line of questioning, which was, you said that the overall individual pricing model is some time away. Just general idea of when that is, 2 years, 3 years from complete implementation?
Well, for complete implementation, I'd really rather not give you a time frame because I don't know. I personally think it's a ways away, but we will be, as soon as possible, doing some experimental work on it, and for individual customers who want to sign up for that, it could be much sooner. But a lot of utilities are finding that the best way or they think the best way to do this is to put in all of the meters, let people become familiar with their capabilities, and by discussion with the customers, get a better idea of what the customers would like to see in their rates. And so that's probably the process we will take.
Thank you.
Just one more question. I wanted to inquire about the how the smart meters will be useful for us in fulfilling the strategic plan, and I imagine that it's going to be a key tool in terms of our goal of reducing electrical usage by 7% by 2014. Is that part of the intent?
That is part of it. Right now, we're relying on our energy efficiency programs, but when people get immediate feedback and can see when and how much electricity they're using, it will be easier for them to cut back.
Okay. And then we've also had an issue here of reducing electrical system losses to less than 10% by 2014. Will it be relevant to that at all?
It will be, because it will tell us how much electricity is being used. It will give us some other information that will allow our people to analyze the distribution system and to see whether there appear to be losses in the system and where to work on first.
Okay, well, good luck on everything. And during the operation and maintenance phase, it'll be helpful to have reports on this periodically. After the demonstration, when you're actually in full-scale operation. Thank you.
All right. We do have the video.
Oh, okay. Yeah, after the video, we have a request to speak on this item.
The city of Glendale is entering a new era, the era of the smart grid. Glendale's commitment to remain a leader in green energy and to use increasing amounts of renewable energy means new requirements for our system. A smart electric grid can help us meet a variety of needs. For example, as electric vehicles become the vehicle of choice for many, the smart grid can make charging more cost-effective and efficient. In recent years, both drought and increasing demand have reduced water resources across the state to extremely low levels, an urgent situation that must be addressed. New technologies that are the foundation of the smart grid are key to meeting these new challenges. What does Glendale Water and Power's move to the smart grid mean for you and for the city as a whole? For you, it means greater access to more information so you can save money on your electric and water bills while helping to protect the environment. For the city, it means a more efficient, reliable, and resilient electric grid and water distribution system that lower the cost of service and reduce rates over the long term. Glendale Water and Power is one of only 100 utilities nationwide to receive a federal Department of Energy Smart Grid grant. This $20 million grant will help to reduce the cost of our smart grid commitment, as well as accelerate its implementation over the next 3 years. We will begin by replacing all electric and water meters with new smart meters and continue with the installation of a new meter communication system. Every one of these meters was used by GWP in the past to record electricity use. As technology advanced, GWP adapted by using newer technologies to deliver higher levels of service and reliability for you, our customers. Smart meters are the next step. Currently, you have to wait up to 2 months to find out how much electricity and water you used and how much you will have to pay for it. With the smart grid, you will have nearly instant access to your electricity and water usage via in-home devices and web-based connections to your meters. Your new smart meter will be connected to a two-way communication network called an Advanced Metering Infrastructure, or AMI. The AMI system will serve you in several important ways. First, your new water meter will provide frequent and accurate meter readings to GWP so that we can alert you of possible water leaks in your home or business. Finding and repairing these leaks helps to prevent high bills and wasted water while reducing damage to property. Second, new leak detection sensors on our water distribution system will help us find and repair leaks in your neighborhood just as quickly. AMI also will help to pinpoint outages so we can restore your service more quickly. The new meters will be installed in 2010 and 2011. The installers will be in uniform, will carry identification badges, and their vehicles will be clearly marked. You will receive a letter in the mail 2 to 4 weeks before your meter will be upgraded. As long as we have access to your current meter, you do not need to be home for the upgrade to take place. However, if you would like to make an appointment, please call 800-757-5963. This number can also be used for comments, questions, complaints, or to report problems. Service will be interrupted for a short period during installation. Once your new meter has been upgraded, the technician will place a notice of completion on your front and side doors. Afterward, you may need to reset any time-sensitive electrical appliances. You should also run either an outdoor or large indoor faucet for 1 minute to remove air from your pipes. Meters are the property of GWP, and the upgrade is part of GWP's ongoing improvement efforts, so you will not see any charge on your bill for the upgrade. The box an electric meter is plugged into is called a meter base. The condition of the base and the wiring inside the building are the responsibility of the property owner. Your new meter may be more accurate. Some older meters fail to record all of the water or electricity actually used. Because of this, you may see a small increase in measured usage after we install your new smart meter. Your new meter will provide you with usage information in a variety of ways. If you have a computer and internet connection, you will eventually be able to access your usage and cost information online. Your electric meter will have a two-way radio to communicate with a device in your home that displays usage in real time. GWP will be developing programs to provide these devices to customers at reduced cost. These devices are very helpful in understanding the amount of energy used, resulting in behavior adjustments that save energy and money. The new meters and communication system will also make it possible for you to participate in new optional pricing plans when they are offered. The cost of delivering electricity is sometimes lower depending on the time of day. But currently, depending on your rate, you pay the same price all day. In addition, renewable sources of energy are not able to be tapped into on demand. By choosing to use electricity when low-cost or renewable energy is more readily available, you will be able to lower your bill and support cleaner energy resources. This system will be compatible with new smart appliances that will be available in the near future. These appliances will have the ability to communicate with your meter and automatically adjust to changes in energy demand. GWP's strategic plan mandates aggressive goals for cost containment, reliability, and sustainability. The new smart meters are not only the first phase in our move toward the smart grid, but a crucial step toward achieving these goals for the benefit of all of our customers and the City of Glendale as a whole. Conservation, efficiency, customer service, and reliability. Glendale Water and Power, your trusted community utility for the past 100 years, continues to strive to surpass your expectations, both now and in the future.
you have any questions? Any questions?
I just had a comment, or yes, I do have a question, actually. The video here is to be shown to customers over the TV channel?
Over the channel and to the groups when they're receiving the meters, at least in the demonstration.
Okay. How often will it be shown on the channel then? Just once or twice?
I don't know that it's been scheduled yet. But
Okay. You'll check in the volume, I take it.
yes.
Okay.
But
I noticed you had a section in there about neighbor comparison. Is there an issue there with respect to sensitivity of personal information?
No, the neighbor comparison isn't by individual, but it's by block or area.
Okay, so it's anonymous then. All right, thank you.
I just had a comment, or a question, I should say. Will that video also be available online? Well, is it?
I think it could be, yeah.
And I know a concern of Commissioner Armenian, who's not here, is the language, the multiple languages that this video can be in. Are there any placeholders right now for that to happen?
Go ahead.
Terry McDonald, project manager. We're going to do it in Armenian, Spanish, and Korean. So we planned on that from the beginning. We wanted to get this one through and approved, and then once the script was satisfactory, go out in the other languages.
Great. Anything else? Okay, at this point, I'd like to invite Mr. Herbert Milano to speak on this item.
Thank you very much, President Yao, members of the GWP Commission. My name is Herbert Milano. As you know, I have always been a strong proponent of all these initiatives that eventually will allow us to conserve and also that allow us to reduce our costs. So I've been very much in favor of it, but I think that there are some questions that have not been answered. If the cost of this project were, let's say, $50 million, would you be able to tell the difference between a $30 million project and a $50 million project? What if the cost were $70 million? Would you be able to tell that difference? Well, it's very difficult unless you know what the cost per dwelling is, and I don't hear that number. So what is the cost per dwelling to install one of these meters in a single-family residence for electricity, and what would be the cost of that meter for the water meter, for electricity and for water? I think it's a relevant number, and I think that we should also know what was the final cost at the cities where this system was implemented. Because I think that you need to have a gauge as to whether this system is going to be installed under the expected costs. My experience here in Glendale and looking at all the different projects is that 95% of the projects go beyond their expected cost. You know, it's incredibly bad. And so project management and cost containment of projects has been a significant problem here. And I think that we should know in a way that you can always know, and the public, what is the actual cost per particular unit. Also, if the objective is cost savings, you know, what are the expectations of costs for the residents? You know, after this is implemented, what do we expect the cost to be, and do we have that target? Second, 62% of the residents live in multifamily units. So we have it for electricity, but we don't have it for water. So what are we going to do with regard to that 62% of people who live in multifamily housing for water? Do you actually know that? Do you yourselves know that? I don't think you do. The other thing is about cost containment is that we really should be targeting a cost after this thing is implemented to say, look, let's make sure that we have the lowest cost of the 4 cities that comprise Glendale, Pasadena, Burbank, and LA. You can say, you know, we are going to be so effective that our cost will be the lowest of the 4. I mean, that's a true tangible number because they're all publicly held utilities. So that is my objective, to find out what would be the eventual goal for residents who conserve the most. So if I conserve well, or my tenants conserve well, what will be the expected cost? And if the cost is going to be by usage, or are we going to be loaded with a particular fixed cost, you know, that then gets translated across, and basically the individuals with the most conservation wind up paying the most? Because if you get a fixed cost initially, if you only spend 1 kilowatt hour, that 1 kilowatt hour is going to be very expensive. So I would love to have answers to these questions. Thank you very much.
Any comments or questions? Jim Miller?
But do we have a cost per meter on this? I imagine we do.
We do have cost for installation of per meter and installation of the meter. What we are looking at, though, is a whole system. And the system is capable of many, many things. And so we do have prices for the meter. We do have prices for installation.
What are those costs?
I mean, I don't have them
Okay.
available right now.
Speaking of which, do we have any data on cost overruns in our projects? I know that Chevy Chase was a particularly difficult project that got done on time and under budget, but has that been looked into?
The two projects that I'm most familiar with, Chevy Chase and Unit 9 at Grayson Power Plant, both came in under budget.
Okay. It might be useful to have that audited, given some of the allegations that were made, I think. Anyway, follow up on that. Thanks.
And also, I have a question about the comparison of rates. I think Mr. Milano made a valid point of cost comparison, but isn't one of GWP's objectives to compare with other utilities in the overall scheme of things on our rates? One comparison is on the strategic plan is the 35% less than Edison's rates, and so would this tie in with that as well, with all the projects that we're doing?
Well, that is correct. That is what our strategic plan shows. Last month we had a presentation on our finance and our rates, and we showed that we have significantly reduced our rates, and that we're kind of comparable to the surrounding utilities of Burbank, Pasadena. And that is the bottom line, is what is your rates. And with this system, we think that we'll be able to give people rate options, which will allow them to use the electricity more effectively. And again, as I mentioned, if people are then able to recognize and benefit from using electricity when it's cheaper, we're able to pass that on because we don't need to supply the electricity when it's most expensive.
And at this point, I've heard before that we don't know what the savings would be until we actually do this. Is that a precursor to understanding a rate structure?
We have looked at what the savings is, and as I indicated earlier, it had a payback of about 8 years. But what the full benefit isn't really covered in those savings. To the extent that we're able to respond more quickly to outages, to the extent that we're able to tell that there's an outage without people having to make a phone call, as they do now under certain circumstances, means better service to the customer. And that's very hard to just put down in the bottom line.
One more question as it relates to the previous conversations. I'm sure we've used some sort of benchmarks in calculating expenses, calculating budgets. Can we maybe see in future reports some sort of analysis of what was done before, and also systems that were implemented before? And I'm assuming since then things have changed as well, so we should be able to do it, maybe not according to the benchmarks, but maybe even a little bit better.
Are you referring to some of our projects, or
some earlier projects nationwide that have implemented the smart grid system,
okay,
and what those costs have been as it relates to what we're planning on, number one, spending, and how we're planning on spending that?
We can look at that. One of the things is we are one of the leaders right now on the smart grid, and there are other utilities around us. Edison is one, PG&E, Sempra are all putting in smart grid technologies, but they haven't completed it either. So getting final results are going to be very difficult at this point, but we can take a look at what we've got and show you a comparison.
Yeah, that'd be great, but I think in due process, I think we need a second on that request to look at the benchmarks of AMI, because I think just to formalize, is that correct, legal counsel? Should we have a second to that request for staff to look at the benchmarks of other AMI projects?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So you feel that there's due process required to have a second-tier review of...
No, I understand that during the process of the commission meeting or city council meeting, certain requests made by a commissioner or city council member needed a second to agendize the item for staff to proceed with that request, because they don't want to get multiple requests when there's only one commissioner or one city council member is interested in looking at it. And so I thought the new process for this year is to have at least 2 commissioners agreeable to that request before staff says, okay, that we'll look into it.
That wouldn't come up, President, that wouldn't come up as a due process issue. That was certainly the recommendation of GWP staff, that this council adopt that procedure for determining whether or not to agendize a matter and or bring it to the city council for review. Certainly, if this commission would like to have the issue agendized, we can discuss that under new business. In order for it to be on the council's agenda and for this commission to take formal action, it would need to be agendized here as an action item. And today, this item is agendized only as a report. However, if you all wish to consider this in a future agenda, we can certainly talk about that under new business. And depending on what this commissioner's desire is, if just one of you want to have it heard, and that's the policy that you intend to follow, you can go ahead and put it on the agenda. If you want to adopt that policy of having more than one commissioner agree to have a matter put on the agenda, then that's the procedure you would follow to determine whether or not you want to put it on.
Oh, yeah, because I understood from staff that that's the policy of the city council when they implemented that, so that 2 city council members have to agree on a certain item before it gets looked into or investigated. So I thought that was the standard that the commissioners have to abide by now. So that's not correct, that we can follow our own procedure where one commissioner request an item to be heard for the next meeting, that will be okay, sufficient, or do we need a second?
You're correct that that's the procedure at council. This commission can adopt its own procedures. As we talked about previously, it was our recommendation that more than one commissioner decide to have the matter heard, just because at times if just one commissioner wants it heard, it may be that all of the other commissioners don't want it heard, or it may be that it's not an issue that is warranted, that all of the commissioners want to have heard, but you can certainly adopt your own procedures.
Okay, thank you. We'll bring it up in new business. Any other questions or comments?
I do have one comment. I would like to point out we do have quantified goals present in our strategic plan, as alluded to earlier, reducing electrical usage by 7% by 2014, establishing water rates at or below 80% of the average rates in the area by 2014, reduce electrical system losses to less than 10% by 2014, and reducing electric rates to 35% below SE by 2014. I wanted to ask the other commissioners about this allegation of cost overruns on projects and whether that's something that we should look at or ask for some kind of report on in terms of, let's say, an inventory of projects done by GWP over the past year or two.
Well, frankly, I've heard the allegation. I hadn't heard any specifics. I mean, we could look at it, but...
It's going to take time, of course, right? It might be worth looking into. I mean, take a couple of months to look at it is what I would suggest, but if we're going to go by 2 in the commission, I would need one of my fellow commissioners here to...
Yeah, it was something we'll bring up in new business if we need
Okay,
to.
all right, well, that's fine then, if we could bring it up. Okay, all right. I have no other questions. Thank you for your time.
And I just do want to point out that as far as the cost of this project, we will be watching it closely. We need to watch it closely, not only because it's good business practice, but the Department of Energy, who is giving us a grant, is going to expect reports as well.
Understood.
Great, next item, please.
Agenda item 3C, the electric reliability report. Mr. Ramon Abueg.
Good evening, Commissioners. Last month, we sent you a report on our 5-year performance at the request of Commissioner Jimian. We weren't able to review that. I want to know if you have any questions to that report. If not, I can come back and answer those questions. But this month's report will be presented by Henry Abrari, our Principal Electrical Engineer.
Henry Abrori, Principal Electrical Engineer, Commissioner Yao, Commissioners, good afternoon. What I have for you today is the reliability report for the month of February. Unfortunately, we had 5 outages during this month. Our first outage was on Columbus feeder number 6, and that was because of failure of an underground switch in an underground vault that we have. The second outage was on February 6, Rossman feeder number 8. The cause of that outage was tree branches getting into the primary lines and creating an outage. Our third, Grandview feeder number 13, Mylar balloons were the culprits, unfortunately, and February 11, tropical number 7, there was a bad switch on a power pole that our field crews requested an outage so they can get that switch replaced. And on February 18, Grandview feeder number 9 was actually opened up and relayed, and our crews patrolled the line, and they couldn't find an outage for a reason for the outage. All in all, for the month of basically our indices for the 12-month period, our system average interruption frequency index, or SAFE, for the past 12 months was 0.88. That indicates that approximately about 72,870 customers were affected. And that's below our goal of 1 outage per customer. The second index was the System Average Interruption Duration Index, or SAIDI, for the past 12 months, and that was 48.6, indicating an average outage time of about 49 minutes per customer. That was slightly higher than our goal of 40 minutes per customer. And our last index, KD index, the Customer Average Interruption Duration Index, for the past 12 months was 0.92, indicating that the customers that actually were affected, the outage period for them was about 55 minutes per interruption, which is higher than the 40 minutes, our goal of 40 minutes. I entertain any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions?
Thank you for the report. In the past, I believe we received graphs showing how KD and SAFE and the other indices were changing over time, and it was missing this particular time. If we could have that in the future.
Sure.
I think incidental exceedances of the goals are going to occur, but we're concerned with general patterns, of course, and
Sure.
if a pattern were to emerge, we'd want to hear more about what staff is doing to address it. I know you are working hard on that. Thank you.
We'll have that in the future.
Thank you, sir.
All right?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next item, please.
Agenda item 3D is a legislative update. Give me 1 minute, please. President Yao and members of the Commission. My name is Lana, and this is actually your monthly update on legislative and regulatory things. On the state level, the California Air Resources Board, referred to as CARB, is actually analyzing the renewable electricity standard under 3 different scenarios. Those analyses are expected in the forthcoming months, and what we'll be seeing is the staff report due in June of 2010 on the renewable electricity standard. Also, on cap and trade, the EAC recommendation that was brought before this commission last month, which is primarily 100% auction in the state, has been delayed. It was originally scheduled to be heard by CARB board February 25th. That has been moved to March 25th and 26th at their meeting. On the federal level with EPA, you've all been briefed on the endangerment finding with regards to greenhouse gases being classified as harmful to health and welfare. And there is a movement within Congress. Certain senators have taken action to pass a resolution of disapproval of this Murkowski amendment. And what ended up happening was that the APPA legislative rally The APPA took a motion to disapprove of the EPA finding, partly because they have an existing policy that says that they don't want regulatory agencies setting policy with regards to greenhouse gases. That was taken without California's vote at all, so Glendale and the other SCAPA members and CMUA members had no input on this particular issue, and it's something that's being debated at the state level currently, and we'll come back to you with any interesting reports or anything that has to do with Glendale and how it might impact us. For the EPA budget, though, there is an interesting item of note within their budget. EPA currently has a budget of $300 billion, and they did receive a $300 million cut from last fiscal year. However, the administration is requesting a $43 million increase in one particular line item, and that line item is for climate regulatory efforts. So you're going to be seeing a very stringent emphasis on regulation of greenhouse gases and the climate change in Washington as well as in Sacramento. On the legislative front, February 19th was the deadline to introduce any new bills. Staff at all of our state agencies, so SCAPA, which is the Southern California Public Power Authority, as well as CMUA and Glendale staff, as well as other legislative staff, we're combing through thousands of bills to find the ones that are most applicable to our agencies and what those impacts might be, and we'll be bringing them back to you next month. On the state, one really interesting thing on the state level, the RPS bill that I have been promising is going to showed up in the Agenda 2010, which is the Democratic package of 27 bills, which is attempting to address the economic crisis primarily in California. So the RPS bill is housed in a section that's called Jobs for a New Economy, and it's, again, containing the same kind of problematic deliverability requirements that we saw in the previous RPS legislation. Glendale, like many of our SCAPA fellows, are not opposed to the 33% per se, but we are opposed to certain limitations and a lack of flexible compliance with the legislation that's coming down. So we're going to keep a very close eye on this legislation, and we'll be reporting back to the Commission as well. On the state level, one of the most important things that is going on is the Hoover Reallocation Act. It's an extension of our existing contract, power allocation contract with Hoover. We are after over 2 years of negotiations, have come to a compromise with the three states that we will receive 95% of our allocation, and also we will also fund the Multi-Species Conservation Act for the Lower Colorado River. Public Power is taking it to a tune of $150 million if we are able to get our 95% allocation. This bill has very strong support in Washington, over 50 original co-sponsors, which is sort of unheard of there, according to our lobbyists. So that's looking fairly good. Those internal squabbles that were going on with Arizona that we feel are very internal to the state seem to be resolved in the larger picture. So it looks like we're going to be moving forward with that, and we'll keep you apprised on that. And then finally, on the Renewable Energy Incentive Act, which would extend and also expand existing ARA legislation, Section 1603, in order that we would be eligible for, essentially, since we don't have tax-exempt status, what we would be looking for is a grant from the Treasury. And what we want to do is to have that apply to municipal utilities and private developers. Currently, it only applies to IOUs, or investor-owned utilities. And right now, that is going through the Senate, does not have support in the House. So we're going to see and just keep track on that and report back as well for there. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I have one question. Did I hear correctly that the RPS, or some kind of renewable act, was embedded in the jobs bill?
That's correct.
What was that? Can you clarify that again?
The package is called Agenda 2010, and it's intended to jumpstart California's economy. And so the ways this particular RPS bill is intended to create more jobs and also at the same time push the environmental levels in California to even higher degrees. So what they're doing is tying RPS to new jobs, which sort of makes it a very politically sensitive thing to try to, change or address.
Okay, so they're trying to increase the percentage of the RPS to a certain amount of jobs created in the state?
Because the legislation at this point looks like it wants to keep it in state and limit the kind of deliverability that we're able to take on the energy. Does that make sense?
Do I have any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Dodd. Next item, please.
Your timing is great. Agenda item 3E, Water Report. Mr. Pat Hayes.
Good afternoon, President Yao, Commissioners, staff. Pat Hayes, Principal Civil Engineer, Water. Brief report this month in water. We're doing fairly well on our conservation. To date, our cumulative conservation versus the 2006 year, which is our base year, is running at 18%. So we're well below our target rates in terms of conservation. And that has a nice effect in two other areas. Because of conservation, it limits the irrigation, which is this time of the year should be academic for most users. Their irrigation systems should be off. But recycled water use is going well ahead of what it has been in the past. Recycled water is not subject to conservation restrictions, and we're looking to exceed, with the projections we have now, our consumption of recycled water over our normal year of about 1,600 acre-feet. We expect to be a bit higher than that now. The other significant trend item is that going back a year or so, it's not atypical to see that about 70% of our water comes from Metropolitan Water District. The rest of it comes from local groundwater production and about 4% of it from recycled water use. With the reduced consumption, it's all coming out of our water being purchased from the Metropolitan Water District. This is a good thing for the utility and for the customers. The rate now, about 50-50, about 50% of our water is coming from local production. So a fairly dramatic improvement from years past, from a 70-30 percentage to about a 50-50. And that all goes really directly to the consumers and following water conservation. So we appreciate those efforts on the part of our customers to help us stay well below the Metropolitan Water District guidelines. That constitutes my report. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you. Very encouraging. I wanted to ask, I believe we were going to develop a well to help recover our adjudicated rights in the Verdugo Basin. Has that come about yet?
Yes, we actually have two wells in the offing. One of them is what we were referring to as the Foothill well. It's on Foothill Boulevard. That's a relatively small well. We expect about 190 gallons per minute from that well. It was a well constructed back in the mid-1920s and was used for some period of time and then taken offline. We're in the process of redeveloping that well now, and the plan is to build, and we have under contract, a pipeline that will be built from there to our New York reservoir. So we blend it into that reservoir when it comes online. There's a few issues about getting an old well going again that we're going through the trials of that now. And then secondly, we had a pilot well drilled on the Rockhaven Sanitarium property, which has turned out to be a very, very high prospect well site. We expect somewhere in the 500 to 700 gallons per minute from that. And in actuality, there might be actually a second location on that same site that could further enhance that production. Those plans are underway. We have a consultant working on that with us, Kennedy Jenks, and the kickoff meeting for that was about 3 weeks ago. So in about a year and a half's time, with good luck, that well should be online. Between the two of those, going to your immediate question, adjudicated rights, we have 3,856 acre-feet per year that we're supposed to be able to get from Verdugo Basin. We currently only produce, depending on the wet or dry year and the availability of pumps and any particular maintenance issues, somewhere between 2,200 and 2,600 acre-feet. So we have quite a gap that we can close, and most of that will be closed with these two wells.
Thank you.
Mr. Hayes, I'm not sure if this is part of your report, but can you give us some updates on the water conservation efforts? How are there people calling in reporting conservation, water conservation compliance issues, or are they people complying with the 3-day-a-week watering?
Well, because as Mr. Basson pointed out, we currently only get 6 data points a year. Going to your immediate question, we only discover folks who are watering outside those periods if someone either reports them or someone in the city happens to notice it. But we've actually seen very good compliance across the board by our residents in terms of irrigation watering. And it's actually a fairly simple matter. Once they've reprogrammed their sprinkler systems to not water during those days, or only water on those days and outside the restricted times, generally they'll stick with that. The second effort, this time of the year, I'd highly encourage people to turn off the irrigation systems because there's really no need for it with the amount of relatively continuous rainfall we've had. So that's another way to conserve. We don't see much in the way of complaints. If those complaints did come in, they would likely go to our customer service department. But I have not heard of that. Tammy is here from customer service, so I might ask if she's received anything to that effect.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Yao, members of Commission. We take the water waster calls, and we're down to about 10 per week. And most of those seem to be people watering down pavement, and we send a letter out reminding them not to. We have very few repeat offenders. So it appears that people are complying for the most part.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, we have one request to speak. I'd like to invite Mr. Herbert Milano, please.
Commission President Yao, Commissioners and City staff, my name is Herbert Milano. For a long time, I've been asking for some measures. By the way, when I come up to you to speak on these issues about cost or cost per unit, it's really from my background in cost accounting and a way of presenting information in a way that is easier for us to digest. So in this case, I've been looking for a number that will tell us what is the average individual household usage of water per day. Now, in the past, I requested what I thought was a very simple report, and I was told by the city attorney that this was too difficult or impossible, which is, what is the average usage of gallons per single-family home in Glendale? Given the report that you had last month, and due to that average that they use, it appears that it's 585 gallons per month, as the average usage. And I think if that was an average usage, then we must have a significantly higher usage per single-family homes. So I wanted to see if we could ask for a report that tells us, look, 62% of the families in Glendale live in multifamily housing units. And on the reports, it shows how many units there are. You basically send an electric bill per unit. We should be able to find out, right, if we average those numbers out to say, look, for this particular building, we're charging this. They have 10 units. Therefore, their average usage is this per multifamily dwelling, single dwelling. So this way we know really whether single-family homeowners are truly saving water or who is really saving the water here. Because as of this time, it appears to be still significantly high. The second thing I found on the report that I read on the web is that during the months of April and May of last year, the actual usage exceeded the base year. And so to what extent is the rainfall that we've had affecting and skewing the results? Are we really saving water, or is it just simply the rainfall? So I think that a proper report would actually show an adjustment for the increase in the amount of rainfall to see if we're really truly conserving water. On that, one last point is that the city of Pasadena only has 2 days per week when it comes to the days when you can actually water. And on a personal note, basically the city staff report is correct. I cut off my water totally for landscaping, to have a significant impact, and I hope that in my next bill it actually starts showing up. But I'm still at a loss to figure it out if we, on average, are doing better with regard to per unit usage of water. My calculation is about 180 gallons per day per unit on a multifamily dwelling. And it's basically moved around from 130 to about 200 gallons per day per dwelling for a multifamily unit. And I think that we ought to know, because we ought to know where our efforts should be placed initially for a greater impact. Thank you very much, and I hope that you can make a request like this to the staff so that we can get an appropriate record. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe Mr. Pat Hayes can answer, or staff can answer this. On the last slide about the water conservation report, isn't the rainfall and the temperature taken into consideration on some of these metrics on if we're actually conserving based on our actual behavior change rather than the weather?
Yes, if you're looking at your report for March, it's actually the second to the last slide. And it's a series of 3 graphs that look something like this. There's a CIMUS weather station in Glendale. It's run by the state of California, and it tracks the temperature, humidity, and uses an evapotranspiration calculation, which addresses the question about, are we seeing an anomaly in our water use because there's all this rainfall or all this temperature or the effect. And the effectiveness of the water conservation started in July of '09, and during that time, in the middle graph, the water use is well below the zero line, and the evapotranspiration rates are actually above the average during that time. That would be indicative that we are conserving, even though it was warmer during those times. The water use was below what it was against the base year. So I think that goes right to the heart of the question. In spite of either warm temperatures or low temperatures, there is conservation going on, and overall our consumption has dropped.
You must know the per capita demand in the city, residential versus commercial. I would imagine it's part of the urban water management plan that you must have.
We do have that, yes.
Do you know what it is offhand?
I hesitate to do public math, but
okay. It's on the website?
It is, yes.
Okay.
And if you would like that actual report, we can provide that to you as well.
Oh, I think if it's on the website, that's fine. But that's the urban water management plan, right?
Right, and it gets updated every 5 years, I think, and we're working on the next one as we speak. So.
Okay, all right.
And it does, we are, in the early numbers, showing a reduced consumption per capita with that. So I'll refer to one number that's in there. We were in the kind of the 125 per capita per day, 125 gallons per capita per day, and we look like we can sneak under the 119, 118 sort of number going forward because of conservation measures. It's important to also note that we're not trying to get into draconian measures here. We're in stage 2, 3 days a week watering. We only need to reduce our consumption by 10%, and we've reduced it cumulatively by 18%. So we're doing quite well, and at this point, no need to change the direction of the ship, so to speak, to keep it on track.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next item, please.
Agenda item 4, oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes, and the timer bell will sound indicating 1 minute left to speak. The commission may question or answer or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or discussion or decision. The general manager may refer the matter to appropriate staff for investigation and report.
And we have one call for a request to speak. I'd like to invite Mr. Herbert Malongo, please.
I was wondering if I may have 5 minutes.
Since you're the only one, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I handed to you a summary of the public speaking history, and it's on the back of this document that shows the number of times that I've spoken in oral communications, and where basically I spoke in oral communications 3 times by myself last year. And then on 7 of those occasions, there were either meetings were either canceled or there were no speakers. So I don't see the logic or the reason for cutting down oral communications from 5 minutes to 3 as a matter of policy. And I was wondering how the other commissioners feel about that change, because oftentimes the way to convey information is to bring a PowerPoint presentation, especially when the things that I say here are sometimes presented in a different way by staff, or sometimes the outcome that the people get is that the information that I present is somehow a distortion of what is out there. So I would request that you change your policy, because they really don't have that many speakers coming forward. So anyway, I took this thing from the minutes that I found on the website, by the way, with regard to oral communications. And I think headed in that direction is the wrong policy. And I have a little quotation here with regard to the Brown Act provision. The people do not yield their sovereignty to the bodies that serve them. The people insist on remaining informed to retain control over the legislative bodies that have created. This is from the Brown Act provisions of the state of California. The purpose is to encourage people to be involved, and I don't think I'm really too contentious here. I just simply want to make sure that we're using data in a way that it is the most effective. So I have a couple of points to bring up. I mentioned to you that I wanted to know the average consumption of water per dwelling. If you take this usage, as was quoted a little earlier today, with regard to per capita, well, we have 2.75 average residents per dwelling. Well, that should put you over 500 gallons a day. It sort of like gives you a perspective. And it should be significantly different between single-family homes and people living in multifamily. And I think it's a relevant number. I would like to know how I'm doing compared to other building owners and their usage per dwelling unit. I've figured, is 180 reasonable? Am I better? Are they doing it better? Is it something that I should change? It's relevant and it's significant, and it should be placed on the bill as in terms of gallons usage. I keep repeating that, and I've been doing this for the past 4 years, asking that we get gallon usage because the city of LA does that. I don't understand why we don't do that. I made a request to the California Public Records Act concerning what are the number of late notices and 3-day disconnection notices for area code 91205. Area code 91205, according to income reviews of the agency that the city uses, is $35,000 per family. That is the median income of area code 91205. So the question for me is this: if we had such a significantly large number of residents who are defaulting or on their electric bill or are being late on their electric bill, shouldn't we know how this is impacting that particular zip code? Now, I've been in systems for a very long time. Creating that kind of report seriously through a query language, it's a 5-minute job. It should not be that difficult. When I made the request from the city attorney, I was told that it was going to cost me $4,000 to get that report. Simple report. Make the query, how many people are late or how many people got the 3-day notice by zip code. And I'm suggesting that perhaps one of you can carry it so I don't have to spend $4,000 to get that data. Why? Because what you recommend and the policies that you implement and the policies that you would recommend to the city council are heavily impacted on those costs, especially when it comes to cost for electricity that is impacting the majority of these people who live in multifamily housing. I have had to reduce my rents from 10 to 20% significantly since the rents from a year ago. I'm doing my part to sort of try to keep hold of these tenants, but in the meantime, their electric rate is skyrocketing. I mean, it's insane. And I think it needs to be addressed. Every time I come with this approach, someone takes a piece of the data and says, well, let's do an average for the whole city, or let's take only this movement only. But there are the records in the CAFR. At the end of the CAFR, you got the statistical reports. From there, you'd see as a whole for the city how much it is that we pay for residential usage for electricity. Is there. It's why take a piece out of the data and say, oh, if we look at the data this way, then we pay less. And I think that, and I'm requesting that you ask for that information. We should know how many people in area code 91205 are late on their bill and are having difficulty paying those bills. Thank you very much.
Any questions or comments? Anything staff likes to address?
I just do have one comment, because he did mention that electric rates are skyrocketing, and the fact is that starting January 9th, the electric bills for our customers have decreased an average of 9%.
And if I may, with regard to the Public Records Act request, the way those are handled by the city is that if there is a programming change or if in order to respond to the Public Records Act request, the city would be required to, I would guess for that cost, update its computer systems or generate the data which it would not otherwise have, then that cost is passed along to the person making the request. Otherwise, it's borne by all the customers.
Well, the question is, I guess, in this matter, is that report, with the systems in hand today, is that report possible to generate?
It can be generated, but the cost for generating that report will be $4,000
to the city.
To the city. It is not a push of a button report.
Okay, that's the. Sorry.
When you say report, are you referring to the report on the 91205 zip code or the gallons?
Let me clarify what I've said, because I'm not sure we said 4,000. We may have said 2,000. I'm not sure what the number is, but it was a request by Mr. Milano. We did an evaluation of what it cost to do that, and that was the cost that we identified for the city attorney, who passed it on to Mr. Milano.
And that specific report to the number of lates in that zip code, or which report are we talking about? I want to clarify. Or is it the gallons per?
No,
it's the electrical, right?
It had to do with a particular zip code. I don't remember the exact report, but it had to do with, I think it was notices in a particular zip code.
All right, that's the report.
Would there be benefits in creating this report apart from Mr. Milano's needs that we're aware of?
I'm not aware of any. We do monitor late payments. We do follow that, and but I'm not sure that I see the benefit per zip code.
Okay.
Yeah, I have some comments on that issue because, as you know, I mean, the state's in a financial crisis, and a lot of people are not as very worse off, and there's a lot of interest in other utilities on providing these disconnections and late bill notices on, and understanding how many people are impacted by that. And so maybe it's not maybe a stretch to request that perspective, but not. I don't think it's right to focus on any one zip code, because I think that's just more of a self-serving interest. If we can provide maybe an overall general some data on how Glendale is doing compared to other utilities on disconnection notices or late bills, are we providing the accurate or the benefit to these customers to be aware of our care program or energy efficiency programs where they can utilize to save money so they can pay their food or the rent. So isn't there a way to provide a report where it's overall Glendale rather than any specific zip codes?
We do follow that. We do periodically report that to the commission. We have seen an increase in the number of people asking for extensions. We have granted an increase for those people, and so we're making payment arrangements with more people now than we were 3 years ago. And we are understanding of the economic situation. And when people want to pay and they come in to come in or call, we try to accommodate them and make arrangements.
Is there a way we can have that item on the agenda in future meeting to express those different the stats on how many people are actually asked for arrangements or make bill payments? Alterations for compared to a base year? I'm not sure what the base year would be, maybe year over year for the last 3 years.
We have done that. We didn't see a reason to update it every month, but we could update it. It might be about time to do that. It's probably been about a quarter since then.
Yeah, because it seems like there's a lot of interest out there generally throughout the state. So do you think maybe next meeting or the meeting after that?
I'll have to check, but either next meeting or the meeting after that, we should be able to provide you with that information.
Okay, thank you. Comments?
There was an inquiry regarding the use of, if I understood correctly, use of gallons on bills as opposed to billing unit, which is 100 cubic feet. Do we have any information indicating that that's been a problem for customers or a source of confusion, or do we have any marketing data on what customers like?
We are looking to change our bill and to add some information. I'm under the impression that when I ask Tammy to come up and talk about that.
President Yao, members of commission, we do have the gallons on the bill now.
I thought that had been brought up.
We have the 100 cubic feet, and we have the gallons. I believe where there is a misunderstanding or where we lack having the gallons on the bill is on what is our electronic bill. And that is because that is a module that we purchased through our CIS system. That would be a modification to have that shown on the bill that appears to look like your real actual bill, but it's not. It's a virtual bill. And so the gallons are not on e-bills. They are on hard copy paper bills.
Thank you. I just had one other comment here on the length of oral communications. I think this has been, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. President, but I think this has actually been a discretionary item and is really up to some extent as to what time is available. I think the limitation has been more enforced when we've been required to end the meeting by a certain time because somebody else is taking council chambers. No. The inquiry was an average gallons per day, I guess, on the bill.
It was total of the gallons in the building cycle. That's my understanding. The bill right now is expressed in gallons for the overall bill rather than per day. And then someone just have to divide that by the number of days.
Oh, that would be a simple calculation. Okay. You're just shaking your head. Feel free to come up. Of course, I'm making.
Maybe you can clarify. I've spent like a half 30 seconds.
Thank you, President. In the city of LA, we have been getting this number, average gallons per day, right there on the bill, and it gives you the comparison. Because a number that is much larger, and I can tell you that even though to you, making a simple calculation like that is a no-brainer.
Understood, yeah. But
seriously, it's a smaller number. It's a number that is more tangible to see when you're looking and saying, my usage per day is 200 gallons or 600 gallons, whatever the number. Especially if it is a small number, it makes it easier and tangible for someone to say, am I conserving or not? And the fact that you have such a large city such as Los Angeles using it that way, I think is critical. And I think that's why it needs to have that change. The number has to be relevant and small. If you wanted to teach kids to use that number and say, look, we're going to give a special to anyone who can bring this number and we're going to lower it, it is tangible for children to be involved in it as well. It's used for all kinds of promotions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. And maybe our legal counsel can advise on that. I don't remember changing the oral communication from 5 minutes to 3 minutes, as Commissioner Miller brought up. When did that take place?
I'm not certain. That's something we could look into. I believe, as Commissioner Miller indicated, it's really a function of how much time we have for the meetings. It's certainly within your discretion as a commission to have longer or shorter time for oral communications. But as you know, on past occasions, we have had meetings where there's a meeting immediately after our meeting and we have to vacate the chambers fairly quickly. So I think it's a function of limited time in this room.
Do you know what the City Council allows for the oral communication?
I do not. I believe it's 3 minutes, but I am speculating.
We'll revisit that issue. Do you guys want to talk about that? Maybe have it as 5 minutes or 3 minutes?
Well, for this, because this is an oral communications item, you're not at this time to take any action on matters. However, you may consider agendizing for future commission meeting this discussion, as well as perhaps the concept of whether you want one commissioner or multiple commissioners to weigh in on when something is added to the agenda.
So should we bring that up in new business? Okay, so I think we're done with all communications. Next item, please.
Agenda item 5, old business.
I think part of this old business is from the last meeting we didn't finish. Are there any new are there items from the last meeting that needs to be brought up? We think we left early and adjourned the meeting before we went over the old new business and agenda forecast. Anything else you guys want to bring up?
No, I don't have anything, Mr. President.
Next item, please.
Agenda item 6, new business.
So for new business, we can discuss the 3 minutes versus the 5 minute oral communication.
Well, again, it's not an, you would want to agendize it for future commission meeting.
Right.
Yes.
Do I have a motion to agendize that?
I'll make a motion to agendize it. Is it legitimate to express at least an opinion at this point?
I think that'd be all right. Certainly, you can give your comment.
All right. My view on this is that it be discretionary and that it be dependent on time available and number of speakers and things like that. I think that gives the greatest flexibility to honor the public's right to be heard, while at the same time honoring our obligations to other parties that may be using this room. That's all I have to say on it. Thank you.
I second the motion to agenda this for the following meeting.
Okay, do we need to vote on that?
All those in favor?
Favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So the item is agendized for the next meeting, and whether to consider a 3 or 5 minute limit on all communications, right? Is that your motion?
To consider time limits more generally is how I would put it, because I think we want to allow it to be, to some extent, under the discretion of the president.
Okay, and a new business? You want to make a motion to agendize the report from staff to benchmark the analysis of the different AMI costs?
Going back to that, I mean, I'm sure since Glendale is one of the initial cities taking this step into putting together the AMI system, you're probably not going to have many benchmarks. What you probably will have is a bit ahead of us, and maybe use that data to whatever it's available to the city of Glendale. So to whatever extent we can kind of keep track of what our surrounding cities are doing, that would be helpful. But understanding that it's, this is new on a national basis, and not much hard data exists out there for fully implemented programs. So I would ask to put a motion to come up with any reports that might help us understand better what the benchmarks might be for implementing the AMI system.
Maybe I have a comment on that. Couldn't we, because we expect staff to come back every month to provide an update on AMI, can staff at their discretion bring us costs when the time comes, in the future when they do implement the demonstration? Because as you mentioned, that the benchmarks or costs that other utilities are doing, because they haven't completed their AMI program, and of course obviously Glendale hasn't started as fast as the other utilities. So is that feasible where staff can come back to us with the cost rather than providing a benchmark?
Absolutely. I mean, and timing-wise, it doesn't have to be at the next meeting. It can be in the next few months, as long as wherever you feel is appropriate, where these numbers are available. If they're unavailable as we speak, then there's no point of a report. But this is, I can understand, it's a tough task given the limited number of information that's out there.
Recognizing that besides the local municipal utilities, there's other utilities in which the data is not necessarily readily available to us.
Absolutely.
So is there a motion on the floor to request staff to create a benchmark analysis of the AMI costs? Or would that be...
There is a motion at one particular point in time, not necessarily the next meeting, to provide some sort of figures that would help us better understand what the costs are of nearby cities that are implementing this system.
I'll second the motion.
Any more further discussion on the issue?
Is there a vote on the pending motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Okay, so that's on the... And then there's also another item for new business that Commissioner Miller brought up on the allegation of those cost overrun of different capital projects.
I have a question in connection with that. We have a financial audit that's performed, I think, annually by a outside agency. And that when's the next audit to be performed?
Well, let me ask Bill Fox to come up. He might be able to answer that question.
Is this on? The annual audit is completed within the fiscal year. We have a fiscal year ending June 30th every year, and so the most recent audit has just been actually released. The question of budget versus actual is often not easily discerned when you're looking at a comprehensive audit report such as that. You're talking about going down to the detailed project level basis, which Mr. Milano was referring to.
Right.
Probably for more clarification purposes, our most recent GWP projects, the large ones that Mr. Basson had referred to, we've actually been under budget. I think Mr. Milano, without putting words into his mouth, was probably referring to other projects elsewhere in the city, not necessarily to GWP. I think important to his point, though, is that we do have a good way of monitoring progress on projects that we do to make sure that we are within budget and try to be under, from a time perspective, within the schedule that was originally set out. Or if there are changes, that there are valid reasons for time being exceeded or cost being exceeded. So I do believe that with the project that we're now undertaking, the AMI project, we have put controls in place. We have project budget in place, and we are doing the monitoring that's required. But we'll be happy to take a look at the existing GWP projects and those recently completed to find out where we stand from a budget to actual perspective.
How much time would it take to do that approximately?
Well, I really don't know until I really look into it. We'll put it on the agenda as soon as it is available, and we'll make it a top priority.
It's probably well worthwhile. I think it would give us an idea of our skill at project management and if any improvements are needed. I would make a motion that we audit our projects over some reasonable time frame, half a year or a year, and see how the actual expenditures varied from projected budgets. But, of course, I open it up to debate.
Yeah, let's discuss that
Yeah.
a little bit before the second.
I think a way of looking at it would half a year or a year may not be enough, just because some of these projects take longer than half a year or a year. So maybe some reasonable time, maybe 2 years or.
Well, I think what we need to do is go back and take a look at the inventory of our recently completed projects, and that'll give us a better perspective on what we could report to you.
Yeah.
On the ongoing AMI project, we are putting in controls in place to monitor that, and we know exactly where we are within our overall budget. So that's something that Mr. Steiger had requested to be put in early on, and we have done that.
And I agree with Commissioner Miller to look at those projects, but also shouldn't there be a dollar level amount of project? We don't want to look at different small
I was
projects.
planning on putting things of a major dollar level in there. I have to draw the constraint line at some point. What I don't know is the inventory of what we have. Therefore, at this point, it would be hard for me to tell you what would be the appropriate dollar level or how many. But we'll make sure that it represents the activity that's being performed.
I'd certainly concur with what Commissioner Yao said. We should be looking at major projects, whatever that line is.
Okay.
I think there's still a motion on the floor.
I second that motion.
Any further discussion on
Call for a vote.
on favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Any other new business?
No.
Next item, please.
Agenda item 7, agenda forecast. April 5th is the next scheduled meeting of the Glendale Commission, Glendale Water and Power Commission. At that time, currently scheduled is a proposed agreement with the U.S. Department of Energy on behalf of the city to receive the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009 grant funds for implementing the AMI Smart Grid Initiative. That will also include a resolution authorizing, that's actually the resolution that will be going to the City Council, authorizing the city manager or his designee to execute all necessary documents with the DOE on behalf of the city to receive $20 million in 2009 ARA grant funds. Additionally, the Commission will be receiving a quarterly risk management update from Mr. Steiger, the overview of the Glendale Water and Power organizational chart as requested under old business, and also a financial report update from Mr. Fox.
So I assume the next meeting will have the proposed agreement with the DOE on the RI funding for AMI Smart Grid is under the AMI agenda.
Yes.
So I'd like to request that the future meetings all the way to the end of the year will also have a monthly AMI update. If you can put that on the agenda to just discuss AMI, whether they be community meetings or demonstration projects that are planning. So if we can put that down for every month of the year, that would be great, because this is an important project that we want to follow up on every month. Yes?
The quarterly report on the strategic plan, I don't see on here for future months. I know that this particular session, we were presented with a hard copy, but no report on it.
That's correct. It is actually, if you look under July, there's a item listed there for quarterly risk management update.
I'm sorry, I meant the strategic plan update.
Oh, okay.
I think a gentleman may want to comment.
I'd like to just add something. Right now, we're going through a strategic planning process, and as we get that completed, we're going through and updating our existing plan, and we're rolling forward some of our existing initiatives, evaluating where we are. At the conclusion of that, we plan on coming to the Commission and sharing with you the results.
Okay.
Regarding the quarterly report that, that was passed out to you, we plan on an ongoing basis to continue doing that report. But we aren't necessarily going to place it on the agenda unless it's the Commission's desire to do so. We thought that it was more of an ongoing reading material report, and that any major initiatives that we have, we would then share with you on an individual basis.
My thought is we should have a brief presentation on it, actually, just at least your scoreboard with an opportunity to ask questions, because this is guiding the agency, and this is the opportunity for the ratepayers to see how their utility is moving ahead. So I would suggest we do have this as a regular agenda item, with just the scoreboard being reported, with an opportunity to ask the general manager or his representative questions.
We will have that as a regular quarterly report, and I think the thing is, right now we're in a transition zone.
Understood.
So that's the strategic quarter report that you're requesting?
Yeah, that's this item here, which we got the hard copy of.
Yeah, I think there might be a little bit of confusion, because we actually have the strategic plan, and the quarterly report not only discusses the strategic plan, but it also covers other things that GWP has been involved in. So I think it is a good point that you make, Commissioner Miller, that we go ahead and review the scoreboard on a quarterly basis, so that any changes that have occurred, whether they're positive or negative, that you're appraised of it.
Yes, I agree with that. So that's
yeah.
Is there a particular month that we were looking at to report back on that?
Well, we got the hard copy this month, so my guess is in June would be the opportunity, pending, of course, the completion of this internal review that was alluded to.
Mr. Fox is shaking his head yes. So.
Okay, all right. I'm just checking. We have our annual capital improvement program and budget status. I thought we had an item also on to review operation and maintenance programs.
I believe that's actually included in the organizational chart overview that's coming up next month.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any items? All right. Let's see that. Next item, please.
Agenda item 8, a request for appeal. Ms. Godinez.
And our next item is a hearing to consider whether or not to grant a hearing on the merits. At issue is an appeal from the general manager's decision to uphold a $250 meter tampering fee that was assessed against the appellant under GMC Section 13.08.140. The appellant is Mr. Tim Pinch. The hearing is now open. Before we can call up our speakers, I will ask our legal advisor to provide a brief overview of the procedure and the issue to be resolved by the hearing. Ms. Godinez?
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Commission. As Commissioner Yao indicated, today this Commission is called upon to consider whether or not a hearing is warranted. At issue is a $250 fee for meter tampering or unauthorized use of a water meter. It's assessed under Glendale Municipal Code Section 13.08.140H. If, in the opinion of the Commission, the facts stated in the notice of appeal do not warrant a hearing, the appeal may be dismissed, and the decision of the General Manager of GWP will become final, subject to judicial appeals. If the hearing is determined to be warranted, it will be noticed by mail and agendized as part of a regular GWP Commission meeting. So today, the merits of the appeal are not at issue. All that is before you today is a decision whether or not you feel that the appeal should be granted. Under our code, there are no specific findings that you need to make, but generally speaking, you need to decide whether there's evidence of sufficient substantiality to warrant the granting of a hearing on the merits. In plain English, this would be ample material evidence of a substantial character. It would not be based on conjecture or speculation, but it would be the type of facts and information upon which you would make a decision in your everyday life. There are no specific findings, as I said, that you need to make, but by way of example, if, for example, GWP did not follow the proper procedures or acted arbitrarily or capriciously in making its decision to not grant the appeal, or if you find that the appellant has presented sufficient information or new evidence that would warrant the granting of an appeal, those would be grounds upon which you could find that you want to go ahead and agendize the appeal. The GWP Commission's decision today is de novo, which will be based on the evidence presented today in the hearing, as well as evidence in the file, including the appeal documents, the staff reports, and any letters received. So individuals that are speaking today should submit all evidence that they wish the Commission to consider as part of today's decision. So I'm not certain whether the appellant has made an appearance today. You do have a written record that has been provided to you by Glendale Water and Power, which includes documentation received from the appellant. You can consider the appeal based on the written record, or you can consider comments of those who wish to speak, which would include members of the public who may wish to speak on this item. And I believe GWP staff is available and can provide you with information if you'd like.
Well, at this point, I'd like to invite GWP staff to provide an overview of the case, if necessary.
Yes,
Before we begin, I just wanted to ask counsel, we can ask questions at this time to clarify.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, thank you. Please proceed.
Doreen is Assistant City Attorney, and I've asked her to present the facts behind this case.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Yao, Commission members. My name is Doreen Martros, and I'm a Deputy City Attorney representing GWP. I will be giving you a summary of the facts that have been provided to you in the written materials in connection with this appeal, and I will be happy to answer any questions at the end should you have any. In summary, on September 17 of 2009, water service was disconnected to Mr. Pinch's property for non-payment of a utility bill. And a notice of terminated service, which is a red tag, which is a copy of which, or it should be a part of the packet presented to you, was placed on the meter. The notice of terminated service explains in it the consequences of establishing service by the customer without GWP actually coming out to restore or reconnect service. On September 17th of 2009, Mr. Pinch or someone on his behalf went ahead and submitted payment to GWP. A service request was put in to have service restored to the property. And when on the same day the GWP staff member went to the property, they realized that service had been connected by Mr. Pinch or someone at the property, not GWP personnel or staff. On September 21st of 2009, the meter tampering or unauthorized use fee was charged or applied to Mr. Pinch's account pursuant to Glendale Municipal Code Section 13.08.140 H1C. And on October 14 of 2009, Mr. Pinch contacted GWP. Thereafter, on October 29th, Mr. Pinch corresponded with GWP requesting the $250 to be reconsidered. And here we are with the appeal that Mr. Pinch submitted, or the request for an appeal. Prior to the actual disconnection and the placement of the red tag on the meter, of course, GWP follows its normal procedure where there's a reminder notice sent for the past due bill, and thereafter there's a final notice of disconnection that is sent to the customer advising him or her what to do in order to avoid disconnection. And on the backs of all of the notices that GWP provides to its customers, there are provisions indicating that if service is reconnected by someone other than a department representative, an illegal connection fee may apply. That's a summary of the matter that's before you. If I can answer any questions, I'll be happy to do so.
Questions?
I have just one question. To your knowledge, was there any procedural, was there any procedure that GWP did not follow in connection with this case?
To my knowledge, no. All of the procedures that GWP has in place and follows normally were followed.
Has there been any disputation of fact concerning the case?
The only disputes that we have received from Mr. Pinch has been what has been memorialized in the documents that you have before you.
All right.
Are there any changes that GDP made that will have been adequately notified to the public and specifically to Mr. Pinch on the change in fees or the notice procedure?
I will speak to the change in fees, and I will defer to Tammy in terms of notice. The $250 fee was approved and adopted by the City Council via an ordinance, where we amended the sections of the Glendale Municipal Code pertaining to enforcement, payment, unauthorized use, unauthorized reconnection. As with any ordinance, the matter was subject to a public hearing. Notice was published in the Glendale News Press. City Council considered the ordinance, adopted the ordinance. The ordinance went into effect at a later date.
But the Commission here has no role, really, in discussing the law. Is that correct? I mean, we're really only evaluating the facts and the due process.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to mention, if I could at this point, there is an important consumer right issue here that's the right to be informed, and I think that's the kernel of the case here. And whether GWP provided was reasonable in its way of informing this particular customer regarding the penalty. How many times on average does GWP terminate water service per year or per month?
I will defer to Tammy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
President Yam, members of Commission, we average about 90 water terminations per month.
And I've been here maybe 2.5 years, I guess, so I've seen over 2,000 terminations, but in that period of time, the Commission has never heard a case where somebody indicated that they did not get adequate notification regarding the penalty. That's my observation. My question to you is, has the staff received any protest regarding notification of penalty in recent memory?
No, as a matter of fact, as of July, or from July 1st of this year, we've had 69 instances of theft or meter tampering. 53 of those were specifically meter tampering. 32 of them were reconnection without authorization, which is what this situation is. And of those, 23 were water. And out of those 23, this is the first that is saying that they did not get proper notification.
Okay. Is there what do other utilities do in the area regarding notification to customers when of penalties and of when anti-tampering devices are put on their services?
Burbank and Pasadena and Anaheim do the same thing that we do. They actually put a tag on the meter when it's disconnected that warns the customer that if they choose to turn it back on, they're going to be they could actually be prosecuted and there would be a fee assessed. The city of Azusa does not even put a tag on the meter. They just bill the customer with the fees.
What kind of fees are typically assessed by other utilities?
The city of Glendale, ours is $250 for the tampering fee.
Yeah.
And Burbank is $300. Burbank is $500. Pasadena is $300. Anaheim actually has a $75 flat rate that they charge, and then I believe it's $45 per hour for any administrative costs that they may incur.
So Glendale's practice is actually within the norm of utility practice in the region, and in fact, its penalty is actually rather light compared to what we see elsewhere.
Yes.
And its notification procedure is actually better than at least one instance that you mentioned where they didn't provide any notice.
So I don't know of any utilities that have the warning actually on the bill, the reminder notice, and the notice of disconnection.
I don't see any significant disputation of fact. Due process seems to have been followed, and I think the consumer's right to be informed is properly followed in this case. And I would submit to the commission, pending, of course, debate, that this is not, that the general manager's decision here be upheld.
We'll have that discussion as we provide Mr. Pinch with
Okay, I hope I didn't speak
some
up
time to speak, but I think he's not here. Do we proceed with straight to the public comments then, if Mr. here to make his case?
I guess for the record, is you can ask if there's anyone here to speak on behalf of the appellant, and if not, then yes, I would proceed with any public comments.
Are there anyone here to speak on behalf of Mr. Pinch? If not, then we'll open up for the public comments. And we have one public request to speak. Mr. Milano, please.
Thank you, President Yao, members of the Glendale Water and Power Commission and staff. My name is Herbert Milano. I would like to bring to you another perspective. First of all, I want to declare that I don't know this person who is requesting the appeal, but I'm going to suggest that the appeal be granted for several reasons. First of all, it has not been abused. And I think that by going through this appeal process, you will learn significant things from the perspective of the appellant. And I believe that in all these years that I've been coming here as well, I have never seen one except for the one that we had with a tremendous, multi-million gallon usage that we had a few months ago. I take a look at something that is, to me, fairly essential. We don't know how many of these 23 water meter tamperings were residential as opposed to commercial. So to really get a sense of it. But I figure that anyone who doesn't pay the water bill, that is a pretty significant situation to be in, to say, I'm not going to pay my water bill. I think that you ought to know and hear this appellant why he didn't pay the water bill. So I'll give you some conjecture. He could be a businessman that is on vacation a lot. That was my situation years ago, where I was traveling all the time, and somehow, if I made an automatic payments and so forth, things got paid. If not, I could have missed it. The other is with regard to the timing of these letters and how they're done. Is it simply via direct mail, snail mail? And if so, is it really effective? We leave room for someone to say, look, I didn't get this bill. And I don't think that we have a 100% foolproof mailing system. I get at my house several times a month the wrong bill from somebody else. So we have to allow that someone got into this position through probably some negligence on his part or inadvertent negligence that I think is worthwhile knowing. And we might know a few other things. What is the length of time between that 3-day notice, and the time when, the person receives it and calls? What if he received it the day before and says, I just got home and I got this notice and it's due tomorrow. Can we make an arrangement? And what if the answer was, sorry, these are the rules, forget it, you get to pay or we close it off. And now this person is coming home from a trip, and the following day he figured out, okay, what am I going to do here? I need water. I need to flush my toilet. And decided to basically to do this particular egregious act, that it may not be so egregious if you let the person speak to you. So I think that you learn a lot by having the person come before you. You learn a lot about the procedures that the city uses. And I think that it is so incredibly rare that it is worthwhile for educational purposes for the public and for you to allow the hearing to take place. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Milano. Any questions or comments? I do have a few questions, maybe for staff. I would address the comments to Mr. Pinch, but since he's not here, maybe staff can help us understand, because part of his appeal is based on his knowledge of the $50 fee, and unfortunately he's been doing this for a few times, not just one time, because he's missed his payment and he was willing to pay the $50 in the past, and that was his expectation, was that he's going to continue paying that $50 for reconnection. So, and his belief that this $250 fee was above and beyond what he thought he would be paying, and that he was notified, even though the tag was muddied according to the documents. So, what is staff's perspective that this gentleman appears to understand what he's paying, but then he thinks that he thought that he wasn't adequately notified of that $250, and then there was no. Unfortunately, the tag was muddy, so he couldn't see it in the tag, but he wasn't adequately notified. Would that be considered a merit based on the merit to consider an appeal, that this customer wasn't adequately notified from his perspective?
Well, I think that speaks to the merits of the case, but that's certainly something you can take into consideration. As I indicated, it's somewhat open-ended as far as, what discretion you have and what factors you look at in deciding whether or not you want to grant an appeal. So are you asking, just for purposes of clarification, do you want staff to respond to the statements made in his written correspondence to address that issue, or you're asking just if that's something that you can consider?
Yeah, it's something that we can consider, that this gentleman knew and does his pattern behavior, that he's been doing this thing, like paying the $50 fee so that GWP can reconnect his water. So he's been doing this, but then his understanding was that he only pays the $50, but now he's asked to pay that $250. So is that part of this appeal process, is to weigh that having him not understand that there's a $250 penalty in addition to the $50 that he's been paying all this time? Can we consider that as a process for appeal, that we should be considering it because he didn't understand that there was an additional $250?
Yes, you can consider that.
I'll just comment that's a little bit tantamount to somebody running a stop sign and paying a $100 fine each time he does it, and then when the fine changes to $200, he complains that he should have been notified ahead of time. This person received, on, it sounds like 3 separate occasions before the water was even turned off, notification, plus adequate information had he paid any attention to either the commission meeting where it was discussed earlier or the council meetings where the ordinance was discussed or acted on, which was at least 2 different council meetings. This was published on the internet and was available. The tag that he pulled off, he says, was muddied. I don't know how muddied it was or what the ability was to read it. So I guess you could evaluate as to what extent he knew or he should have known about the fine, and whether his actions speak to whether they're correct or not, whether there's a $50 fine or a $250 fine. I mean, at what point is it okay for him to do it and pay the fine, and at what point is it that he doesn't?
But he's asking for a reduction in the fine to eliminate the $250, but he's willing to pay the $50. Am I interpreting that correctly, that he's asking to remove that $250?
I'm not sure that that's the case. I would need to look at the record. It's my understanding that it was a waiver of the $250 fee, but I'm not certain there was a concession that the $50 fee would be paid. Unfortunately, the appellant's not here, so I can't speak to that issue.
Yeah, so he's only requesting that the $250 fee be waived, but he's willing to pay that $50 reconnection fee.
If I could just clarify, the $50 fee that he refers to is the regular reconnection fee. So he is disputing a fee that was charged in the past of $25 prior to us defining what meter tampering was and unauthorized use. So the $50, I believe it was my understanding in his letter that he understands that the $50 fee is the reconnect fee. But he is disputing the fact that the other fee went from $25 to $250, which really is not so much the case because we always had the $250 fee, but it wasn't defined well enough in the code. So I don't believe in, Doreen, if you think differently, I don't believe that it's the $50 fee that he's questioning.
Right, just the $250.
Just the meter tampering.
And just to clarify that, the $50 fee is not a penalty. The $250 fee is.
Yes.
Okay.
Judging by the information given by the Glendale staff and the ample notices and not seeing any evidence to the contrary, unless anybody disagrees.
Well, if I may, if you're completed with hearing from the public, why don't we go ahead and close the hearing, and then you can have your deliberations.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Let's close the hearing and we can deliberate. Unless you have questions.
No, I just had a couple of comments. In my review of the packet that was provided to us, I didn't see any indication of a problem with notification by mail that was brought up. I didn't say anything about not being present or being on a trip or anything of that nature. And I do want to mention for the Commission that a hearing impacts other ratepayers because it's going to cost time of staff to prepare for that, and it's going to cost time for them to be present. So the challenge before us is to be fair here, make sure that this particular consumer who's filed the complaint is heard fairly, and make sure that his right to be informed has been adequately addressed by the utility, but not to also to keep in mind that there are other ratepayers who are paying for all of this. I just want to caution that as we come to a further discussion on this. Thank you.
Okay, so if there are there any further comments for staff or GWP or Mr. Pinch or representative? Okay, then if there are no further questions, we will now close the public hearing and enter deliberations. So who would like to begin?
Just want to clarify, basically, if we decide that we don't want to hear the appeal, then the GWP stand will take place and this matter will be closed off. Is that correct?
This matter will be closed off. That person may have rights to appeal to a court of law, but as far as this commission, that would be the final stage.
But my understanding is for this appeal process that staff's time has been spent already on documenting these things and responding to Mr. Pinch. So the next stage will be for him to appear in front of us to make his case. So I'm not sure about the staff resources being utilized to the extent that it would be if he were to appear.
Well, it's true that staff resources have already been consumed to a great extent, and that's in accordance with due process, and that's certainly this consumer's right. If there is an additional hearing, staff would have to prepare for that and would have to arrange time to be present to hear that. I would like to point out, I think it's of interest that the consumer hasn't attended to speak on his behalf at this point.
Yeah, we're not sure what's motive. But I thought it would be just a regular commission meeting, right? That staff would attend and address the issue at hand?
It would be held, agendized and held similar to this particular hearing at another commission meeting, yes.
That's why I'm not sure if there's additional time that would be necessary or that the resources will be spent in addition to just a regular commission meeting if Mr. Pinch were to appear to make his case.
There's going to have to be some extra time when we hear the case. That's what I'm alluding to, and also in staff's time to prepare for that. I would like to point out what I mentioned earlier, which is that I'm not seeing a significant disputation of fact. This commission has no role in judging the law or evaluating the law. We have seen due process. He was evaluated by successive levels of management, and he's being heard here. And I think the issue, the consumer's right to be informed, falls within industry norms. So my view on this is that I don't think this is worth taxing additional ratepayer time to have the hearing.
Well, I agree with you that there is a right for the public to be notified. And I think that goes to the heart of this matter, where the appellant doesn't appear that he was adequately notified. I mean, this is something that he's been doing 3 times where he had a reconnection to his water, so he expected that the payment would be $50 to reconnect. So if he had known that it was $250 termination assessment to it, tampering assessment fee that he had to pay, and he wouldn't have done it. So I tend to lean towards the consumer's right to be notified and the consumer's right to have a fair hearing to maybe to resolve some of the unknowns that we haven't heard about in our documents.
Okay.
I thought we were ready to vote on it versus a little bit more. I think Commissioner Miller is trying to say is, yes, we'll have another meeting. Yes, we'll have staff here, but the additional time required to discuss this item will cost money for the rest of the ratepayers. In addition to that, I'm not hearing anything that says I don't think there should be special time taken to notify a particular individual. I think a notification should be for the general public. I don't think it's GWP's cause to make sure that any one person who travels a lot should know about this law. They should publish it or they should talk about it and give notices to the public as they would for anything else, and making sure that this particular ordinance was talked about, was published, was discussed. I moved to. I think it's my opinion that there should be no motion granted to appeal the actual fee.
Let me make this point, if I may, to follow up on what you're saying. If we feel that notification is inadequate in this case, which has followed industry norms, then it's incumbent on us to articulate to staff what is suitable to inform the public in this particular case. And we're going to have to find something that's not within industry norms to do that. I'm not certain what our basis would be for making a recommendation to staff if we're not using industry norms, and how much time it's going to take to do that. Of course, we could assign staff to do that. I think, considering that we've been through thousands of these cases of termination of services, I don't know that this is really a worthwhile investment. To look at a less than 1% probability of somebody not being informed. He mentioned here about the tag not being read. I don't know what state of mind he was in when he looked at the tag, but I'm not seeing anything here that's going to provide a better norm, I think, at least a norm that's going to capture a lot of value for the cost it's going to take to develop.
Well, to clarify that, I think I read the documents where he mentioned the tag was muddy, or was too close to the ground, or was on the ground, or else he wouldn't have seen it. And his take on it is that if he did see it and he understands what the tampering fee would be, he wouldn't have touched it. He would have just waited until someone come out there to turn on the water before he turned it on himself. So it was something that he wouldn't mind doing it. It's an oversight. I'm not sure who it is. Maybe the technician was putting too much to the ground, or maybe it was just a perfect storm where it was raining and it got muddy, and so it was really no one's fault, even though he would have known or should have known. I mean, the general public, I don't think anyone in our population understand what was passed, or how the ordinance will impact their daily life. So, I mean, just to give the public the benefit of the doubt, I think we should be able to at least hear the appellant out.
Does staff have any information regarding the condition of the tag when the technician went out to turn back on the service, or if he found it?
The tag was removed, but I can't say that it was in September and it wasn't raining.
And as far as the tag is concerned, if somebody was to just wash off the tag, would it be visible what the notice is saying, or is it one of those tags that once it's muddied or it touches water, then it would somehow?
I wish I had a sample, because you could probably run it underwater and for a long time, and it would still be okay.
Okay.
See, the tag looks like to be a paper that could be messed with. It's not plastic or with some kind of a laminate. A tag where you can't really mess with the lettering, they can wash it off easily. So this tag, I mean, I can imagine after being wet a few days or even a day that it could be smeared.
The tag was actually placed in the same day that we went out there to turn it back on. So it was only in there a few hours.
Excuse me, and you say you don't have any information regarding the whether it was raining in that 2-hour period or anything?
I don't believe it was.
Okay.
Well, I guess unless we have any other comments for commissioners, we're done with deliberating. Good evening. Should we?
So then, if you're done with your deliberations, if there's a motion, then that motion can be brought at this time.
There are two motions to consider, right? One is, should we read both of them and then see if who wants to make the motion of one or the other?
Well, yes, you can certainly make one of these two motions that were presented as options, one of which is granting an appeal and setting a date for a hearing, and the other is denying the appeal or denying the setting of the hearing on the appeal.
I have a question, Ms. Cadenas. If the commission decides to deny the appeal, does the appellant have the option to continue with the city council, to appeal to the city council?
No, there is no right to appeal to the city council.
And if I understood you correctly, his next step then, if he wished to pursue it further, would be to go to court.
That's correct.
And also, that means he can go to small claims, possibly, since the amount is less than the small claims amount?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. Just so we can talk about the filing fees. It's not too much of a cost to take this into a court of law if that was the next step. Okay.
Correct.
Is there a motion on the floor?
I'll make a motion that the request for a hearing be denied and that the general manager's finding be upheld.
I would second that motion.
Let's have a voice vote, because I don't think...
Jemian? Miller?
Aye.
President Yao?
No. The motion pass?
The motion passes.
Next item is adjournment. Our next regular meeting is Monday, April 5th. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
If you have a comment or question regarding Channel 6 programming, call us at 818-548-4013.